I thought I was just opening a credit card statement, our joint account, the kind of routine task I handled every third Sunday morning with a cup of black coffee and the apartment still quiet around me. I had no idea I was about to discover that my husband had secretly spent $40,000 on a single piece of furniture for his mother, while our own rent sat unpaid for 3 months. And the worst part, the part that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it, was that he had looked me in the eyes every single night at dinner. He had kissed me goodbye every morning. He had said, "We're a little tight this month, babe. Let's be careful." While our savings account bled out, month after month, into something I was never supposed to know about. While I drove the same car I'd had since graduate school. While I skipped dentist appointments because the copay felt like too much. While I told myself we were building something. Our apartment smelled like cinnamon that morning. I remember the specific quality of it, warm, slightly sweet, rising from the amber candle I'd lit the night before on the kitchen counter. Marcus always said those candles gave him a headache. He wasn't home that Saturday morning. He'd driven to his mother's place early, saying she needed help with some furniture delivery. He said it casually, the way you say things you've rehearsed until they feel natural. The word furniture now sits in my memory like a splinter I didn't notice until it had already festered too deep to ignore. I was sitting at the kitchen island in my oversized gray sweatshirt, hair still loose from sleep, cradling my mug with both hands and watching the weak October light move across the sage green wall I'd painted myself 3 years earlier. The apartment was perfectly still. Our building was old, a pre-war brownstone in Brooklyn, the kind with high ceilings and original crown molding and radiators that clanged in the night like distant, unhurried conversation. We had been so proud of it when we signed the lease 4 years ago, Marcus and I standing in the empty living room with the keys in our hands, making promises with our eyes about the life we would build here. I had made good on those promises. I had spent 3 weekends on the living room alone, researching paint swatches, taping the molding with surgical patience, rolling the color on in careful, even strokes. I had chosen every rug, every curtain, every throw pillow on the secondhand sectional we'd recovered together on a rainy January Sunday, with fabric from a discount shop in Red Hook and a staple gun from the hardware store 2 blocks away. This apartment was mine in every way that mattered. I had made it a home with my own hands and my own love, and until that morning, I had been quietly, genuinely proud of that. Marcus and I had been married for 6 years. We met at a graduate school orientation, both of us studying urban planning, both of us loud with ideas about cities and quieter with feelings about ourselves, the way academically minded people sometimes are. He was tall and broad-shouldered and gentle in a way that had felt rare to me at 27. The kind of man who remembered the names of your coworkers and held elevator doors and never raised his voice, not even in the worst arguments we'd navigated over the years. His flaw, the one I had cataloged, analyzed, and eventually accepted, the way you accept a structural imperfection in a beautiful old house, was his mother, Linda. She was a woman who wore silk blouses to grocery runs and maintained her Upper West Side apartment with the same meticulous energy she applied to her social calendar and her opinions. She referred to our marriage, in certain company, as Marcus's situation, a phrase I had overheard once at a family holiday and had never directly confronted and had always, quietly, hated. She had never been openly cruel to me. She was far too sophisticated for direct cruelty. She operated instead in lifted eyebrows and questions phrased just so, in long silences that followed news I'd shared expecting warmth, in the specific talent she had for needing Marcus on evenings I'd planned something. She called him every day, sometimes twice. It had been that way since before I knew him, and I had long ago accepted that it would probably always be that way. I had made my peace with Linda, the way you make peace with weather. You don't change it. You dress for it. Marcus was good to me, genuinely, substantially good. And his relationship with his mother was his burden to carry, not mine to dismantle. We had a life that functioned smoothly around her without being defined by her. We had careers. I was a senior associate at a mid-sized real estate development firm in Lower Manhattan. Marcus worked in municipal planning, a job he found meaningful in the specific way civically committed people do, even when the bureaucracy was slow and grinding. Together we earned enough. Not extravagantly, but enough. Enough to live well in this apartment, save steadily every month, and look toward the future with the kind of calm, grounded optimism that feels, when you have it, like a form of wealth all its own. We had a plan. We were building a down payment fund. We talked about neighborhoods, about square footage, about whether we wanted a garden. We were a team. I had believed that completely. I had believed it the way you believe in a load-bearing wall. Not with constant inspection, but with the unconscious, total confidence of someone who has built their entire structure around it. Then I opened the banking portal. It was a routine task. I was looking for a reimbursement from a client dinner I'd paid out of pocket 2 weeks earlier. $140 I'd been meaning to confirm had cleared. The checking account loaded. I scrolled through the recent transactions, half attentive, skimming, and then my eyes stopped moving. There was an outgoing transfer dated 11 days ago, $40,276, to an account I didn't recognize. I set my coffee mug down very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have stopped receiving proper signals from your brain. I leaned forward. I read the number again. 40,276, not a round number, which somehow made it more real, more specific, more undeniably deliberate. Someone had typed exactly that figure in. Someone had confirmed the transfer. Someone had moved that money while I was presumably at work, or asleep in our bed, or trusting that my husband managed our shared finances with the same transparency we had always, supposedly, maintained. My first thought, and I am almost embarrassed to admit how long I held it, was benign. A glitch. A fraudulent charge. I'd heard of people having their accounts compromised. I clicked on the transaction. The memo field read, "Final payment, furnishings." The recipient was registered to a vendor whose name I had to type into a search window to recognize, Hargrove and Elliott Fine Interiors, a luxury furniture showroom on Madison Avenue. I sat very still. The candle was still burning on the counter. The apartment was still perfectly quiet. My coffee was getting cold. I navigated to the Hargrove and Elliott website. It loaded in unhurried tones, all muted cream and beige, slow-scrolling images of rooms that looked more like curated museum installations than spaces where actual people lived. Custom upholstery, hand-stitched Italian leather, lead times of 3 to 5 months. I scrolled through their collection until I found a sectional sofa priced at $39,800, custom configurations available at additional cost, and I understood with a certainty that settled into my sternum like something heavy and cold. This was what had been purchased. A couch. My husband had spent $40,000 on a couch. I pushed back from the kitchen island and stood up. My legs felt strangely disconnected from me. Not weak exactly, but separate, as if the floor and I had agreed to a temporary estrangement. I walked to the living room and stood in front of our own sectional, the pale blue linen one we'd recovered together, slightly uneven at one corner where Marcus had run out of staples and improvised. It was imperfect and entirely ours. I stood looking at it for what must have been 2 full minutes before my phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Marcus. "Hey, delivery took longer than expected. Should be home around 4. Love you." The couch was not for us. I had already known it before I read those words, but the message confirmed something additional and worse. The ease of it. The absolute, unruffled casualness with which he had sent those ordinary, affectionate words from across the city, from his mother's living room, from the scene of everything he had done. Love you, like a man with nothing to hide, like a man who had simply been helping his mother with a Saturday errand. I went back to the laptop and scrolled further back through the transaction history. What I found dismantled me in stages, the way certain kinds of damage work. Not a single blow, but a deliberate sequence, each impact landing before you've had time to recover from the one before. The first payment to Hargrove and Elliot had been made 5 months ago, $22,000, a deposit. There had been 2 intermediate transfers I had somehow missed, one labeled design consultation, one labeled freight and logistics, totaling just over $4,000 more. And then, 11 days ago, the final balance. Added together, the total was $40,276. The entire content of our joint savings account, the down payment fund we had been building for 3 years, the fund I had contributed to faithfully every single month with the dedication of someone who believed in the future she was constructing, was gone. Not reduced. Gone. Every dollar. But the savings account was not the only wound. Scrolling back through the checking account with new eyes that were no longer trusting, no longer skimming, I saw a pattern I had been too comfortable to recognize before. Small, consistent shortfalls, transfers I hadn't authorized, utility payments that didn't match our actual bills, 200 here, 300 there, a subscription charge I'd never seen, a miscellaneous household line that corresponded to nothing in our actual household. Over 8 months, our financial cushion had been quietly, methodically, almost artfully hollowed out. And then there was the rent. I navigated to our shared household email account, the one Marcus managed, the one I almost never thought to check because he handled it, because that was how we'd divided things, because I had trusted the arrangement completely and never needed a reason to question it. I searched the inbox for our landlord's name. 3 emails appeared. The first, 7 weeks ago, was polite. A note that October's rent had not been received and could we please confirm. The second, 4 weeks ago, was firmer in tone. The third, sent 9 days ago, was formal and precise. A written notice that 3 months of rent remained outstanding, and that if the full balance was not cleared within 30 days, proceedings for lease termination would be initiated per the terms of our agreement. We were 9 days into a 30-day countdown, the apartment with the crown molding, the sage green walls I had painted, the cinnamon candle still burning on the counter, the curtains I had hung with a borrowed drill and a YouTube tutorial, 9 days into losing all of it. I don't remember walking to the bedroom. I found myself there, standing in front of Marcus's desk in the corner by the window, the one I had always given him without resentment and without ever needing to open. I had never looked inside that drawer, not because there was a rule against it, Not because he had ever asked me not to. I had simply trusted him, completely, automatically, the way you trust the infrastructure of your own life without testing it daily, because testing it daily would mean you'd never had faith in it at all. I opened the drawer. Beneath the ordinary clutter, pens, a phone charger, a transit card from 3 years ago, sat a manila folder. I opened it with steady hands. Inside were 3 documents: a printed order confirmation from Hargrove and Elliott, dated 5 months ago, a delivery receipt signed by the concierge at 14 West 82nd Street, apartment 9C, dated 11 days ago, and a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery, written in a slanted, elegant script I recognized immediately as Linda's. My darling. It arrived this morning, and it is absolutely perfect. Exactly what I always imagined for that room. You are, as always, the most thoughtful son. Don't worry about her. She doesn't need to know everything. All my love, Mom. Don't worry about her. I read it twice, 3 times. I turn the paper over as if there might be something on the other side, some qualifier, some clause that would make those words mean anything other than what they meant. The paper was blank. The words were exactly what they were. She doesn't need to know everything. I was her. In my own home, in my own husband's desk, in a note his mother had written and he had folded and kept and said nothing about. I was a pronoun, a concern to be routed around, something not to worry about. I folded the note precisely along its original crease and placed it back exactly as I had found it. I closed the drawer. I sat on the edge of our bed. The bed with the white duvet I'd chosen, the headboard I'd sanded and stained myself one long summer weekend, and I sat completely still. The candle in the kitchen had probably burned down by now. The coffee was certainly cold. Outside the window, the October Saturday continued without apology. Leaves on the sidewalk, a dog barking somewhere below, the ordinary world moving through its ordinary paces. It was 11:47 in the morning. Marcus would be home by 4. I had 4 hours and 13 minutes to decide exactly who I was going to be when that door opened. Those 4 hours did not pass the way grief usually does, in waves, in collapse, in the wet, undignified way pain tends to move through a body when there's no reason to hold it back. I did not cry. I did not call my sister or my best friend Renata, though I opened our text thread twice with every intention of doing so. Instead, I moved through the apartment in a state of extraordinary, almost clinical precision, the kind that arrives sometimes on the far side of shock, when everything that was fuzzy suddenly sharpens into something cold and useful. I photographed every transaction in the banking portal, scrolling slowly and methodically, capturing each line item with the same quiet attention I brought to contract reviews at work. I photographed the emails from our landlord. I photographed the note in Marcus's handwriting, his name on a post-it below a plumber's number, and then I photographed Linda's note from the cream stationery, front and back, even the blank back, because I had learned in that hour that blank spaces are also evidence. I sent all of it to my personal email. Then I forwarded it to a second email account I kept for professional documents, one Marcus had no access to and no knowledge of. Then I sat back down at the kitchen island and finished my cold coffee and waited. I thought about the down payment fund, 3 years of discipline, 3 years of choosing the cheaper flight, the grocery store brand, the meal prepped at home instead of the restaurant around the corner. 3 years of telling myself that the sacrifice was temporary, that it was an investment, that the life we were building together was worth the patience required to build it right. I thought about the specific Saturday morning 2 years ago when I had calculated that we'd crossed the $50,000 mark in that account, and how I had told Marcus over breakfast, unable to hide the pride in my voice, and how he had smiled and kissed my forehead and said, "We're getting there, babe. We really are." He had kissed my forehead. He had already been in contact with Hargrove and Elliot for 3 months by then. I know because I checked the dates twice. He came home at 4:17. I heard his key in the lock, heard the specific sound of his footsteps in the hallway. Heavier on the left, always slightly, because of the old knee injury from college. I had found that asymmetry endearing for years. I was seated at the kitchen island in exactly the position I had occupied all morning, laptop open, hands folded on the counter in front of me. I had not changed out of my sweatshirt. I had not cleaned up the apartment or lit a new candle or done any of the small habitual things I might otherwise do to soften the space between arrival and conversation. The room was as it was. I was as I was. I had decided that much. "Hey," he said from the doorway, pulling off his jacket, already turning toward the coat hook. "Sorry I'm late. The delivery guys were—" He stopped. He had registered something in the quality of my stillness, the way animals register a change in air pressure before a storm. He turned fully toward me. His face was open and warm and just beginning to recalibrate, the way a face does when it senses the territory has shifted without yet knowing how. "How's Linda?" I said. My voice was steady. I had not planned it to be, but it was. "She's good," he said, a half second too slowly. He crossed the kitchen and moved toward the refrigerator. "Really happy, actually. The whole living room looks—" He stopped again. The laptop was turned toward him. The banking portal was open on the screen. He stood very still with his hand on the refrigerator handle and did not open it. "I was looking for a reimbursement," I said, "from the client dinner 2 weeks ago. $140. I kept my voice entirely even, the way you keep a scalpel level, not because you're calm, but because the precision is necessary, and I found $40,276 going to Hargrove and Elliott Fine Interiors on Madison Avenue." I paused. "Would you like to explain that to me?" He released the refrigerator handle. He turned around slowly, and the expression on his face was one I had never seen before on him. Not guilt exactly, not fear exactly, but a compound of both layered under something that looked almost like relief, the specific, exhausted relief of someone who has been carrying a secret so long that its exposure feels, for a moment, like rest. That relief lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then it collapsed into something worse. "Clara," he started. "Don't," I said, not loudly, quietly. "Don't lead with my name like that. Don't do the thing where you buy yourself time with my name. Just tell me." He came and sat on the stool across the island from me, not beside me, across from me, with the counter between us, and I noticed the geography of it with something that felt like prophecy. He folded his hands on the countertop, a gesture I recognized from the times he'd had difficult conversations with his subordinates at work, a gesture of managed, deliberate calm, and it made something twist in me that I forced myself to set aside. "My mother has been wanting to renovate her living room for years," he said. "You know that." She's mentioned a lot of things," I said. "Go on." He looked at his folded hands. "The couch she wanted was at Hargrove and Elliott. It was a specific piece. She'd had her eye on it for a long time. A custom sectional, Italian leather. It's beautiful, actually. The room looks—" He looked up and caught my expression and stopped. "Keep going," I said. "She couldn't afford it on her own. Her fixed income, the maintenance fees on the apartment. You know how it is with her finances. He said the last words with a kind of practiced fluency, the fluency of someone who has explained this context many times in their own head, who has built around it an entire architecture of justification. I didn't want to ask you directly because I knew you'd say no. So you just took it, I said. I didn't. It's our joint account, Clara. I have access to. You took $40,000 from our down payment fund, I said, without telling me, without asking me, without any conversation to buy your mother a couch, while telling me. I opened the email thread on my laptop, turned it toward him, while letting our rent go unpaid for 3 months, while telling me we were tight and to be careful. The color in his face changed. He had not expected me to know about the rent. I watched him process it, watched him search for something to say, watched him find nothing adequate and settle instead into a silence that stretched between us across the kitchen counter like a physical thing, like something you could put your hands on. Marcus, I said, still quietly, I need you to look at me and tell me you understand what you did. He looked at me. He opened his mouth. What came out was worse than silence. I wanted her to be happy. She's given up so much, Clara, for me, for my whole life. And she had this one thing she really wanted, and I thought I could figure out the finances before you. His voice cracked slightly. Before you noticed. Before I noticed. I let that settle. Before I noticed. Not before it mattered. Not before it was resolved. Not before he found a way to make it right. But before I noticed, which meant the plan had never been to make it right. The plan had been for me to simply not know. And your mother's note? I said. The one in your desk drawer. She doesn't need to know everything. I watched his face very carefully as I said it. His jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough. Did you ask her to write that, or did she offer? He was quiet for a long moment. She mentioned it when I told her I was nervous about how you'd react to the deposit. So she knew, I said, from the beginning. She knew you were hiding this from me. She was trying to be supportive. She was encouraging you to deceive your wife, I said. That's what the note says, Marcus. Written by your mother, kept in your drawer. That's what happened. He said nothing. He looked at the counter. Outside, the light had begun the slow amber shift of late afternoon, and the apartment that I had made with my own hands was warm with it, in a way that felt now like a kind of cruelty, all that beauty indifferent to what was happening inside it. I need you to call her, I said. Right now, I need you to call Linda and tell her that I know and that we need to have a conversation. Tonight. He looked up. Clara, maybe we should. Let's just talk tonight, just us, and then tomorrow. Marcus. I said his name slowly with the specific weight of someone who has finished being careful. Call your mother. Now. He called. He kept his voice low and turned slightly away from me, and I could hear the tinny, distant sound of Linda's voice through the phone, crisp and composed and unsurprised, in a way that told me everything I needed to know about how much she'd been expecting this call. They spoke for less than 3 minutes. When he hung up, he said she would come. Tonight, 9 o'clock. I spent the time between 4:30 and 9 doing something useful. I called Renata, my best friend since undergraduate school, who was also, crucially, a paralegal at a family law firm in Midtown, and I told her everything in a single, uninterrupted 10-minute summary, my voice steady throughout, the steadiness surprising even me. When I finished, she was quiet for a beat, and then she said, "Okay, do you still have the screenshots?" I did. Good. Don't touch anything else in that account. Don't move money. Don't close anything. I'll send you the name of someone tonight. She called back 40 minutes later with the direct number for a financial attorney named David Park, who specialized in marital asset disputes and whose assistant, Renata, told me would answer even on weekends if I mentioned her name. I wrote the number in the Notes app on my phone and then saved it in 3 different places. Marcus and I did not speak much in the hours between the call and Linda's arrival. He made dinner, pasta, mechanically, out of habit, and I sat at the kitchen table and ate without tasting it, and watched him move around the kitchen with the careful, effortful normalcy of a man trying very hard not to make things worse. At one point, he said, "Clara, I'm sorry. I mean that." I looked at him for a moment and then looked back at my plate. I believed he was sorry. I also understood, with a clarity that felt new and irreversible, that his being sorry did not change the dimensions of what had been done. Linda arrived at 9:03. She was wearing her camel coat, the cashmere one she saved for occasions when impressions mattered, and her hair was set, which told me she had used the 3 hours to prepare. She kissed Marcus on both cheeks when he opened the door. She turned to me with an expression calibrated with extraordinary precision, not quite contrite, not quite defensive, but something in between that left all options open, a negotiator's face. "Clara," she said warmly, as if we were at a Sunday brunch, "I think we should all sit down and speak calmly about this." "I'd like that," I said. "Sit down." She sat across from me at the kitchen table. Marcus sat to the side in the chair between us, which I suspected he had chosen for its diplomatic geometry. Linda smoothed her coat over her lap. She smelled of the same perfume she always wore, something with tuberose and cedar, expensive and slightly too much of it, the way she was about most things. "I understand you've seen some financial transactions that upset you," she began. "Upset me," I said. "That concerned you," she revised, acknowledging my tone with a small, practiced nod. "And I want to say that Marcus acted out of love for me, out of a son's genuine desire to do something kind for his mother, and I think that's important to—" "Linda," I said, "I have your note." She paused. The practiced composure held, but something behind it shifted. The faintest recalibration, a chess player whose gambit has been anticipated. "My note." "The one from the cream stationery. She doesn't need to know everything. I photographed it this morning. I've sent it to my attorney." The word attorney did something to the room. Marcus straightened slightly. Linda's expression underwent a second, subtler revision. The warmth cooling, the negotiator's face settling into something more technical and precise. "I was simply offering my son emotional support," she said. "I had no intention of—" "You knew he was hiding $40,000 in transfers from a joint account that I contribute to equally," I said. "You knew our rent was unpaid, and you wrote a note telling him not to tell me. That's not emotional support, Linda. That's conspiracy." I let the words sit for a moment before I continued. "And it's the second time in 8 months you've done this." She looked at me sharply. This was the thing she had not expected, that I had kept going, that the morning's 4 hours had yielded more than the single transaction, that I had looked not just at the couch, but at everything surrounding it. "I found the other transfers," I said, "the subscription fees, the household miscellaneous line items, the $7,412 that went to your building's maintenance fund in August." I watched her face. I'm guessing that one wasn't Marcus's spontaneous idea either. The room was very quiet. The radiator ticked once. in the way it did on cold evenings, a single sharp sound that filled the silence precisely. Marcus was looking at the table. Linda was looking at me with an expression I had never seen from her before. Not contempt exactly, not anger, but something close to respect, the reluctant, unwilling kind you develop for an opponent you had underestimated. "I want the money back," I said. "All of it. The $40,276, the $7,000 from August, the miscellaneous transfers. The total is $51,640. I have every transaction documented." I slid a single printed page across the table. I had printed it while Marcus made pasta, quietly in the office. Linda looked at it without touching it. "The rent arrears are Marcus's responsibility to clear before the 30-day notice expires. That's 21 days from today. I've already spoken to an attorney, and I want you to understand that if those funds are not returned in full, the conversation moves out of this kitchen and into a legal context that will be considerably less comfortable for everyone." Linda looked from the paper to me. Then she looked at Marcus. For one long, extraordinary moment, she seemed to be waiting for him to intervene, to soften this, to translate it into something she could absorb without cost. The way he had always translated, always bridged, always found the language that kept everyone at the table. Marcus said nothing. It was the first time in 6 years of knowing them both that I had seen him not answer her waiting. He sat in his chair, and he looked at the table, and he did not offer her the language she needed, and something in that silence, imperfect, overdue, insufficient but real, was the first truthful thing he had done since I'd opened the banking portal that morning. "I think," Linda said finally, in a voice that had lost its warmth and retained only its precision, "that you are being extremely—" "Realistic?" I said. She stood. She smoothed her coat again, the gesture automatic, muscle memory dressed as dignity. "I'll have my accountant look at this," she said, nodding at the paper she had not touched. "I'll be expecting a call before Wednesday," I said. "After Wednesday, my attorney makes the calls." She left without kissing Marcus goodbye. I listened to the sound of her heels on the hallway floor, the elevator, the silence after. Marcus and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after she left. He cried, quietly, with his hands flat on the table and his head bowed, in the way men cry who are not practiced at it and find it slightly bewildering. I watched him. I did not move toward him, and I did not move away from him. I sat with the truth of what I felt, which was complicated and large and not yet resolved into any single thing. "I don't know how this happened," he said eventually. His voice was thick. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that I'd figure it out, that I wouldn't notice, I said. That I wouldn't have to explain it, he said. "That's worse, I know that's worse." It was worse. It was worse because it meant the deception had not been a panicked impulse, but a sustained choice. Renewed every morning he'd kissed me goodbye and said, "Love you," with $40,000 of my money already gone. "Marcus," I said quietly, "I need you to hear this, not as something I'm saying in anger, but as something true. I have spent 6 years making this home. I have contributed to this marriage with everything I have, and you looked at that. At me, at what I'd built, at the trust I gave you. And you decided it was less important than not having an uncomfortable conversation with your mother." I paused. "That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And choices have consequences." He looked at me. His eyes were red. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know yet," I said honestly, "and I need you to be okay with me not knowing yet." Linda's accountant called on Tuesday. The full amount, $51,640, was transferred back into our joint account by Friday of that week. I had it moved immediately into a new account in my name alone, with David Park's guidance. Pending the formal process, Marcus and I had begun with a marriage counselor and separately a mediator. Marcus cleared the rent arrears from his personal savings. The landlord acknowledged receipt and withdrew the notice. We kept the apartment. What came after was not a clean or simple story, and I will not pretend it was. Marcus and I spent 4 months in weekly sessions with a couples therapist named Ellen, a measured and clear-eyed woman in her 50s who had an uncanny ability to name things precisely and without sentimentality. It was in Ellen's office that Marcus finally articulated, clearly and without deflection, the full scope of what he had done and why. The fear of his mother's disappointment, the lifelong habit of meeting her needs before anyone else's, the way he had taught himself, over decades, to treat my comfort as a secondary consideration in the specific context of his mother's wants. Hearing him say it clearly was not satisfying in the way I had imagined it would be. It was just true, and truth sometimes arrives like that. Not as relief, but as a weight you now have to figure out how to carry. Linda and I have not spoken since that October evening. I am told through Marcus that she has come to understand the consequences of what she did. I have no means of verifying that and limited interest in trying. Some bridges are not meant to be rebuilt. Some distances are the correct distance. The marriage survived, though it is not the marriage it was, and I mean that in both directions. It is diminished in some ways, I will not pretend otherwise, and it is more honest in ways I had not known to miss. Marcus is different now, or more precisely, he is more fully himself in ways that the presence of his mother's voice in every room had long prevented. He is present in the way that people are present when they have chosen something clearly, when the choosing was costly and they made it anyway. 6 months after that October Saturday, I sat on our recovered sectional, the pale blue one with the slightly uneven corner, which we had not replaced and did not plan to, with a glass of wine and the spring light coming through the windows at the angle I had always loved best, golden and slant, in particular to this apartment at this hour. The sage green walls were the same, the crown molding was the same. The faint imprint of everything I had made here was in every corner of every room, and it was still mine, and I had not lost it. Our new down payment fund had been open for 4 months. The amount in it was not yet remarkable, but it was ours. Mine. Transparently and verifiably mine. And every number in it had been placed there with full knowledge and full agreement, and that, I had learned, was worth more than any balance. I had thought, once, that love was about the absence of certain conversations, that peace required a kind of strategic not looking, a careful management of what you knew and what you asked. I had called that tolerance. I had called it maturity. I had called it making peace with weather. I know better now. Peace is not the absence of truth. Peace is what becomes possible only after you've made truth the only language you're willing to speak.